H-I, that's for Lucy. Let's do that. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H-I, that's for Lucy. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H-I, that's for Lucy.
We were known all our lives as the alphabetical family. When each of us graduated from high school, our parents put our pictures up on the alphabet wall until all 9 of us were up there. Then when Walt Disney came out with Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs, we were 7, so they named us after the dwarfs. Delano was Grumpy, I recall. Einie was Doc, the leader, the bossy one. I got to be Dopey, the lovable klutz, the family clown. The others were sandwiched somewhere between, but of course they had to stop calling us the 7 Dwarfs once Hugo Jr. was born, because by then we were 8. By then also we were living in New Prague, and Dad started the family orchestra, and he decided that our theme song should be 10 Little Indians.
1, 2, 3 little Indians, 4, 5, 6 little Indians, 7, 8 little Indians. Oh, we gotta set the letters first.
Well, we never got up to 10 letters for 10 Little Indians, but we did change the words, and we made it our theme song.
1, 2, 3 little houses, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 5, girls.
Missouri Waltz was another of the songs that Dad transcribed for the band. In time, however, Dad realized we'd never really have all 9 in the band. We were lucky to have 4. 9 Hillstroms. The number wasn't that large for Finnish Apostolic Lutheran families, but once we moved beyond the Finnish community, people thought we were astonishing. They fussed over us for being so good-looking, so intelligent, because we brought home good report cards, good athletes, cheerleaders, good in school activities. And pretty soon we began to think we were rather special as a family. And mind you, this is before anybody had heard of the Kennedys. My purpose in this chronicle is to tell our stories individually, all 9 of them, and then conclude with some of our togetherness times.
Vanhan valan kapakassa puosuvaari istuu yksin joka ilta.
We begin with Einie, first in line, Yksi in Finnish. Named Ina Marie after her 2 grandmothers, she was born in Chicago, Illinois in 1928 and grew up during the Depression. As each of the rest of us showed up, Einie was always there, becoming in turn big sister to each and all of us over the course of the years. I love this image of her doing Irene's hair. As youngsters, she and I were sent to Oppinen class in Maringo to be taught Bible stories while learning the language. In fact, to this day, Einie has a better grasp of Finnish than anybody in the family. And Einie's early experience in that Maringo religious community became very important to her, because it was in Maringo, she says, that she first, quote, consciously accepted Christ as my personal Savior. After attending 3 different high schools, Einie graduated from Deep Haven High near Minneapolis in 1945. In the high school operetta, her solo got more applause than the lead singers did. She started at the University of Minnesota, but she didn't like it. What she did like, and so did the rest of us, was a handsome young farmer from Prior Lake named Norman Bussey, then called Butch. Their marriage in 1948 became for them a lifelong commitment and partnership. There were 5 of us. You can count them: 1, 2, 3, 4, and Delano makes 5 Hillstroms in her wedding party. Then 2 years later, their son Rick here he is. John Frederick was born. J stood for John. Einie's children continue the alphabet where we left off. K was for Keith. Born in 1960, Keith died the same day. But 3 daughters, L for Linda, M for Marion, better known as Heidi, and N for Nancy, arrived later that decade. Here's the family portrait in 1968. Grandson Owen, O is for Owen. The alphabet continues to the 3rd generation. Owen was born to Rick and his wife Kathy in 1979, and Einie and Norm have enjoyed watching them all over the course of the years grow and grow, and all too soon they grow up. A large, robust woman with a hearty laugh, Einie likes to say of herself,
well, I'm number 1. Number 1.
I'm Einie Bussey, and I'm number 1. And no matter whatever the rest of the family does, I'll always be number 1.
It's true. It's true, so no matter how old the rest of us get, she'll always be older. Yeehaw! When they lived on a farm in Prior Lake, as they did for 22 years, from 1948 to 1970, it was a scene from a novel by Willa Cather. I mean, a real farm with cows and hay and tractors and barns and cows. Not nostalgic as it sounds, it was reminiscent of Cather's O Pioneers, the novel where the eldest daughter is determined to help save the farm. And I remember driving through rolling Minnesota countryside to see those fat Midwestern farms gleaming in the sun. One of theirs even had a lake on the property where we could have the greatest bonfires and weenie roasts. Our father, about this time, wrote that his family of 9 included doctors, nurses, mechanics, psychologists, and last but not least, 1 farmer. Einie was that farmer. But saving the American farm in those days was not so easy. So when Norm went off to the university for a degree in agricultural education, Einie, like the talented grandmother after whom she was named, became a seamstress. She called her business Custom Made. In 1970, by arrangement with our parents, they moved to Cokato to take over the Hillstrom Research Farm, only to discover all too soon after that that kind of farm couldn't be made to pay either. And so, in good Hillstrom fashion, they sold it and started over once more, creating the Bussey Garden Center in Cokato. For a time, they also ran a Bussey bed and breakfast, but soon flowers became the sole focus of their lives.
The reason Norm and I work so well as a team after being married 46 years is we have division of labor. He works outside and I work inside. We prefer it that way. He likes things with wheels and motors and engines, and I like to turn the wheels in my mind and figure out how to make a business out of this that's profitable. And it's worked.
By 1994, they were expanding into 14 greenhouses in a big building in Cokato. In 1993, Ine made the cover of the magazine called Greenhouse Grower, which described the operation of Bussey Gardens in detail. When I asked her if she would summarize for us the main events and turning points in her life, Ine listed 3: her marriage to Norm, their children and grandchild, and their relationship with the Lord Jesus Christ. She concludes that her life has been an exciting and fulfilling adventure, a journey in which each day has brought something new. Born in 1930 in Hancock, Michigan, in the middle of a terrible snowstorm, at the house of the midwife, where they had brought Mother because Dad had been snowed in at the lumber camp and was unable to get into town. A Depression child, I too lived in a great many different places. I attended 5 different high schools within 3 years. I think my graduating class was trying to tell me something when they voted me both most likely to succeed, which I secretly wanted, and class clown, which surprised the hell out of me. It's true, I've been given to clowning ever since I discovered that keeping people entertained was a way to keep myself from being bored. And it's true that I've indulged in different kinds of clowning over the years. In fact, putting the apostrophe into my last name was intellectual clowning, a postmodern form of clowning. And it's true that the propensity for clowning has been contagious with certain people in my vicinity. I also admit that I like acting in good plays like Threepenny Opera as much as I've enjoyed directing them. But the reason I turned to clowning in the first place was to deflect family disapproval from the person I wanted to be and the person they never wanted to hear about. For the central passion of my own life has been a love of learning, an absolute hunger for the life of the mind, and a desire to distinguish myself, if I could, as a scholar. I discovered that passion in 1946 when I went off to college at the age of 16 and had a high old time as an undergraduate. First at the University of Minnesota, then at Wayne University, which was so much easier than Minnesota that I could get good grades, hold 3 jobs, and still participate in student activities, such as the debate team, which is where I met my husband. And in student council, which is where I got hooked on politics, the YWCA, where I was sensitized to social issues, especially issues involving racial justice. I was proud in college to be the one to initiate freshman camp at Wayne. I was proud to receive every single damned honor that university had to bestow, including its Outstanding Graduate Award and others. But what I was proudest of those years was my work with the United Nations, on campus first, and then on the national scene, which is how I happened to meet Eleanor Roosevelt during the 1950s. She would become, along with Thomas Jefferson, my lifelong hero and what today we would call role model. The United Nations was also my topic when I won the women's division in oratory. The same year one Guy Vanderjagt won the men's division. 40 years later, as Senator Vanderjagt, he gave about the same speech at the Republican National Convention. But don't you love that headline? Hillstrom speaks again. Hillstrom pretty much made her living with her mouth open. From then on, in one place or another, for over 40 years. And if the truth be told, she's still got it open. I taught high school while completing my master's degree at Wayne. And in that position, I initiated radio programs. I directed 6 smashingly good plays in the course of those 3 years. And I got into hot water for integrating the casts in those plays. Believe it or not, this was in Detroit in 1952 through 1955. And incidentally, I got married along the way to one John Schmay, which marked the beginning of a life of constantly explaining how to spell and pronounce my last name. The first big turning point in my life came in 1956 when this pinup photo was taken, the sort of pinup sent to soldiers in those days. I was a college instructor at Wayne State when John was drafted into the Army, so I went back to Minnesota to start my PhD, and that's where it happened. I discovered American Studies. Lord, what a world opened up for me then. After a year in Germany, where we celebrated our 5th wedding anniversary, I taught for the University of Maryland while John was in the service, we returned to Michigan, and I finished my degree at the University of Michigan, becoming their very first American Studies PhD. And I gave birth to 2 children. At the same time, I gave birth to the dissertation in 1960 to John Steffen, in 1961 to Maria. Thereafter, we advertised on Christmas cards our pride in the family as well as in my professional achievements, especially my first published article in Atlantic Monthly. My passion for American Studies found expression in my teaching, in the radio series Portrait of the American, for which I interviewed famous scholars, and in all of my subsequent publications on American cities, on American protest movements, American eras, American politics, of course, and especially on the subject of American women. This was my first book on the subject. This was my second. I was active in the women's movement of the 1970s, and I helped to create the new field of women's studies in American universities, a discipline which I have continued to support in my later work. I've written on Emerson and the American arts, on Charles Ives and others in the field of American music. I have a special passion for the arts. And most recently, a resource book on American multiculturalism. I even published once, a long time ago, on our family religion, on the metaphors of resurrection to be found in the hymns. The most frightening and most bizarre time in my life led to its next big turning point. In 1972, I sued Wayne State University when I was denied promotion and tenure despite unanimous recommendations. During those hearings, I heard myself lied about and vilified in ways that I didn't think were possible in my academic world. But just when I began to feel like the most worthless piece of garbage, lo and behold, salvation came in the form of a job offer, which transformed my life and my family's. It took us from cold Detroit to sunny California, from being married to becoming single, a single mom just as the children were entering their teens, from being an assistant professor at one state university to a distinguished visiting professor with tenure at another state university. Cal State Sacramento let me teach American Studies to my heart's content. They paid my way to conferences all over the country. In fact, all over the world, including a year as visiting professor in Hawaii. They sent me to Italy, Germany, Finland, England, China. I've climbed the mountains of the moon in Mexico and the Great Wall of China 20 years later, although climbing, even walking, isn't what I do best anymore. In 1990 and 91, I was awarded 2 Lifetime Achievement Awards. I protested feebly that I hadn't had a lifetime yet, but the truth is I loved going to New Orleans to accept the top national award given in American Studies, and the next year to receive the highest honor my university had to bestow, for which occasion I was required to give, you guessed it, another speech. Now this is where creative clowning comes in. I ended that speech with a multicultural America band that included a genuine Kiwi cousin on trombone, all of us performing a tune written by my son while I got the whole audience to sing along. I have loved watching my children move on with their lives. I am so proud of what they're doing and who they are, as I am also of my whole Sacramento family. But having now passed the torch to the young, bright scholars taking over my teaching and office duties, I find I can now look back and realize the greatest joy in my life has been to come home from the classroom every day of my life, or from some academic conference or public lecture, feeling that I had made a difference in people's lives, had opened minds, broken barriers, actively worked in the life of my times. That is to say, my greatest joy has been that I could do that without sacrificing the miraculous, ordinary pleasures of family life, including creative clowning.
Who's that?
Alex May,
And who's that?
Grandma Betty.
And what are we doing?
We're staring you the mask, the beast mask on your face.
Is that silly?
Yeah, that's
Third of us was born Clara May in 1932 in Marengo, Wisconsin, and as Clara May shared our early family history, but as soon as she was able, she changed her name to Cal.
I really don't know who came up with the name Clara May. It seems to me Mother told me it was Emma. Anyway, I never liked it, so I changed it to Cal in high school and have been really happy with the name Cal. I love my high school years. I don't think I learned a whole lot at New Prague High School, but I had a great time, made a lot of lasting friends, and stole the show in the class play. After high school, I became a nurse, and Mother and Daddy were really proud of the fact that their daughter was a nurse. I was proud of the fact that they were proud, and I have loved a career in nursing. I married, have 4 wonderful children, 3 boys and a girl. I love being a mother. That was a very special thing for me. Went back to school and got some more advanced degrees and have gone many places and seen many things. I think maybe I really enjoyed most and still enjoy working with the elderly and with student nurses.
Cal's 4 children, Donald became a doctor, Kathy became a nurse, Jeff, you just heard playing Christmas carols on the saxophone, he's an engineer. Cal moved to Alabama to be with Bob in 1992. He had a PhD in finance and 4 children under 6, so he needed help. All this speaks to Cal's closeness to her children and her influence on them. When Cal was asked to name the major events and turning points in her life, she became reflective.
Gosh, I don't know what the major events in my life. I think the major events would have to be giving birth to my children and watching the children grow up. Certainly, playing the role of a mother just seems to have been very, very important to me and something that I found incredibly fulfilling during my younger years. If there was a turning point in my life, I suppose it would have to be the divorce. After the children's father jumped the fence for a young wife, I took on several professional responsibilities. I am triumphantly divorced. Certainly, as a professional, many of the best things that have happened to me have happened to me since the divorce. If I have a dream, I suppose it would be that some of my grandchildren would become Christian missionaries. The most important thing to me is my personal relationship with Jesus Christ. Having been a Christian as long as I can remember.
As Dr. Cal Brooks, she has held posts as Director of Nursing, Department of Allied Health, Associate Professor at the University of South Florida, Staff Development Director. She has supported the mandating of postgraduate courses for nurses, and she's been a pioneer in promoting the therapeutic uses of humor, conducting successful workshops on humor as therapy. That brings up the fact that Cal has always had her own style of humor, which she has brought to family gatherings over the years. In fact, being silly together, clowning together, this is one of the traits she and I have shared over the years that transcends our profound political and religious differences. Today, Cal loves being a grandmother to 6 grandsons and 1 granddaughter, more grandchildren than any of the rest of us, and she takes the role seriously.
I really do want to be a good grandmother. I want to have the opportunity to influence my grandchildren in a very positive, moral way, so that those old traditional values that are so dear to my heart are not ignored.
That twinkle in her eye when she's with her grandchildren can be detected as well in her witty summary of her place in our alphabetical family. Because what she likes to say is, quote, I am the best looking, the most loved, most intelligent, most talented, the best sport, and also the most humble of us all, unquote. Sure, Cal. Sure you are.
The world, we might do a little Finnish polka for some of our Finnish friends around the United States that are listening tonight. All right.
D is for Delano. Born in Marengo in 1933, he was named after Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Now, our brother Floyd has inherited his father's talent for storytelling, and he has recollections of Delano which can't all be illustrated with authentic photographs, but they're too good to pass up, so I'll improvise with the visuals.
My older brother, Delano, was 4 years ahead of me in high school, and grade school, so he didn't associate much with us little kids. But I remember just before he became a freshman in high school, he and myself and our little brother Hugh decided to take an overnight trip to Yucks Woods in New Prague, Minnesota. He had been in the Scouts, and he just figured that it would be a sort of a nice thing for the boys to go out in the woods and build themselves our shanty and catch our own food with his new bow and arrow, and just spend the night and prove that we could do it on our own, and so we did. Actually, I think we did a pretty good job on building the shanty, covered it with leaves. We got hungry. About that time, he decided to go hunting with his bow and arrow, and we actually found our food. Actually, it was in the neighbor's yard, or a little farmyard near the woods. Well, what he did is he shot a chicken. The arrow went, well, he didn't exactly bring it down. What he really did is it made the chicken stop from running away. And well, anyway, he got that chicken, and so we brought it back to our hideout, cut it up, fixed, roasted it on the open fire, and had probably one of those most delicious meals of chicken that you've probably had the pleasure of tasting, where it's, you know, sort of all black and burnt on the outside and raw in the middle. But when you're real hungry, you eat it anyway. The rest of the evening was one of those where you pretend that it doesn't get any better than this, and then you get so tired so you go to sleep, and then you wake up about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning because it's raining outside, and then somehow you forget about the rest of that, but when you get back home you tell everybody how great that really was. And so it was those types of ideas and ventures of nature that was a little bit characteristic of Delano. Shortly after that experience, of course, he was back in high school and playing football, and didn't associate with the young kids anymore. And then we moved over to Royal Oak, and I guess I really didn't know him too well until we returned to Minnesota after he had graduated from high school to start working on the building of the chicken farm in Cokato. Now, if I were to pick one thing that I recall, it was not the building of the chicken farm, and it was not the saunas. But I think it was the thing that I would remember most about our experience there in that old house in Cokato when we were first starting out was the way Delano decided to decorate his room. He had a small personal room in that old house, and he was given the opportunity to decorate it any which way he wanted to, because that house was planned for demolition within 1 year. So he proceeded to paint his room. And he did I would say he did a unique job. And after he finished his job, and I walked in there and saw the work that he did on the walls and on the ceilings, I gained my first appreciation of Picasso, and, well, for all of those people who paint those things with colors going in different directions where you're not exactly sure what it is. And that's what I remember most about his work there when we started out in Cokato.
What Ellen remembers is how popular he was at Royal Oak High School, admired for taking a girl in a wheelchair to the prom. He wasn't long in Cokato, though, because he was inducted into military service, coming home to check out progress on the new house. What I remember most about the years afterward is his affectionate nature, how he loved spending Christmas morning with the children. And what the California relatives remember is the big feed he put on for them. This was sometime in the 50s. And his affection for his Uncle Wendell, and especially for Wendell's daughter, dear Shirley. Ellen also remembers how nervous he was when he stood in for Daddy to give her away at her wedding. He was so friendly, so open, he seemed to move in an aura of light, the very stereotype of the confident California beach boy, whether in Florida with Bridget or exhibiting the family talent for clowning in Midwestern sunshine. And he was good at sharing that talent. But there came a time when he rejected his past, moved to Oregon, and estranged himself from the family, symbolically changing his name, first to Lamont Hillstrom, then Levante, dropping the Hillstrom altogether, then Levitar, 9 letters with I in the middle. The first 4 spell love, the last 4 stand for biblical wisdom, as he explained. For 30 years, he was to suffer physical and mental illness, and yet his capacity for love remained intact beneath his strangeness. On one of his visits to Sacramento, I took him to my office, and he wanted to read all the books and tell me how much he too admired Thomas Jefferson for his mind. But his own mind was fuzzy, especially his obsession with a foggy Caballerian philosophy based on letters, numbers, and finally colors. Some of his ideas, like those about food and diet, seemed healthy, but not his anger at lawyers and bureaucrats, his delusions, his erratic behavior, his crass appeals for money. There was charm behind his craziness. He says he's reinvented himself through the use of mind here. He's making like Rodin's The Thinker. He bought beautiful property on which he dreamed of building a theme park for children, and he invented a sauna steam spa to earn the money to achieve the dream. These are publicity photos for the spa. This is where he showed a friend and me where he was working on the spa in 1992, and here's the property he called Angel's Crest, on which he planned to build his park so children from all over the world might come and learn from nature. Here he is at Angel's Crest with Ellen some years earlier. Ellen remained closest to him to the end of his life, acting as guardian when he added the initials IWCP after his name for Interworld Child's Park, the name he gave his dream. He filed articles of incorporation for the park and wrote every governor of every state, dedicating an acre of land for that state's children. A man named Bill Clinton, then governor-elect of Arkansas, was the only one to write to thank him. What impressed me most in 1992 was his interpretation of this statue in Corvallis Park. He said the dancer's spirit could be free because she was inspired by the children playing in the park. So after his death, I laid a rose at her feet and urged her to free his troubled spirit too. Among his effects, I found these snapshots with an intensity in his gaze and an uncanny resemblance to our Father, with whom he had never made his peace. On October 1st, 1993, Le Batard took his own life in this room. It is here he spent his final days. From his bed and from the table in what passed for a kitchen, he could look up to see on the wall a map of the United States, and next to it was a huge poster labeled "The Road to Success, Always Under Construction." Pure Americana. It was chock full of witticisms on how to keep on keeping on, trudging towards success no matter what. There was practical Benjamin Franklin type advice and also some very moral sayings to spur him on through darkness. On this day in this room, his friend Russ Lincoln recalled,
"No time did I see him despondent. I can't understand how somebody can be so up as he was with all of his problems, with all of the things that are happening, all the negatives. I'm certain that I couldn't be that way." And I was amazed, and I congratulated him. I pointed out to him many times how I was amazed how he could be so up with so much hanging on him, with such problems. And he was always saying, "Well, we'll go from here."
Clearly, Le Batard too had Sisu. He is buried in Willamette's Veterans Cemetery in Oregon. His gravestone reads D.F. Le Batard Hillstrom. He was 60 years old. After Delano, Ellen was named after a friend of mother's whose name sounded like Eleanor, for Eleanor Roosevelt.
I'm T. Ellen. I'm the
middle child of the family, the happy medium, is 4 older and 4 younger, and that's why I'm the nicest of all of you. So, I am now 57 years old and looking younger every day. I'm married to John. John, yes, that's correct. The other one, I forgot his name already. Living in Venice, Florida. We've been here now 20 years. And our guest today is my good friend Bridget.
And therein hangs a tale. How Ellen and John and Bridget all left the big city of Detroit and ended up in a little town named Venice, Florida, where Ellen heads the Chamber of Commerce, and how 3 years ago she might be found standing next to a Florida governor one day and plucking chickens or turkeys the next day. Born in 1934 in Marengo, Ellen too followed the family around the country, but her high school experience was unique. She spent 3 years in a class of 500 bright suburbanoids when the family was living in the fancy house in Royal Oak, Michigan. But when they moved back to rural Cokato, she found herself graduating with a class of not so bright country folks, an experience that she has summed up in a single word: ugh. She then attended Minneapolis Business College, worked as a legal secretary in Minneapolis, then headed to California to attend UCLA, working for room and board as a part-time governess, and while she was there, she became acquainted with the California aunties. She then spent a year in New York, after which she came to the city of Detroit to live at our house, actually, for a time, helping me do research on my doctoral dissertation. This was at the time I was expecting our children, so it was very important. She took courses at Wayne State. She then worked again as a legal secretary, and then opened an agency to serve Detroit's legal community, becoming partners with Bridget Ross. Her most frightening life experience was the sudden death of another friend.
I had a friend, Kathy Lamb, in Detroit, and she and I developed a very, very wonderful and intimate relationship. I never had my closest friend die within 3 weeks. I couldn't handle it.
In Detroit, Ellen met and married Carmi Kansman. With the wedding party were 3 other Hillstroms, Delano, Grace, and I. The reception held at our house. It was Carmi who knew about the Detroit Fin Camp, which we both joined, buying cabins there and bringing relatives in. This is a sing-along at Ellen's cabin with Wesley, Dad, Irene, and others. The diving tower was the children's favorite hangout at our beloved Loon Lake. Of course, grown-ups hung out in the sauna. Carmi and Ellen then moved to Florida in 1971, where they built and managed what they called the Carmel Apartments. In 1979, Carmi and Ellen sponsored a Cambodian family of 10 to come to America, which made it possible for them to bring other relatives to America, making a lot of mouths to feed. Englewood is where they were living when our parents came to live there. This was their house, and it was there that our father died and was buried. His funeral reception at Ellen's afterward becoming a watershed in our family history. Moving to Venice, Florida, she established a second office of the Kansman Employment Agency, became a realtor, ran for county commissioner on the Republican ticket, didn't win but loved making the race. Having no children of her own, Ellen has really enjoyed the godchild, Bridget, her friend, named after her. Then tragedy struck. In 1983, Hugh committed suicide in Florida. The memorial service for him held in Ellen's parlor. came a time of crisis for Ellen's marriage as well, and soon after she divorced Carmi Kansman and married John Schmay. That's right, John Schmay, my ex-husband, becoming his third wife and taking his name. Marriage seemed a natural solution for both of them at that difficult time in both of their lives. I'm constantly asked how I felt about it, and I explained that these are two people I have cared a great deal about in the past, and except if it adversely affected my children, I think I did the right thing to give my blessing and leave them alone. As for Ellen, 10 years later, she says, I went from an Estonian to a Polak, and both of them were fun. And that's a direct quote. It was Ellen and John who cared for our mother with such tenderness day after day when she came to live with them in 1985. For those last years, Ellen bathed her, dressed her, and fed her daily. She remembers only Mother's happy times until her stroke in 1987, when she died, Ellen says, without suffering. After Mother's death, in her role as executive director of the Venice Chamber of Commerce, Ellen advanced her professional career as entrepreneur. She sees her experience in private employment agencies as the major events in her life, a life that has required moving from place to place, career to career, challenging her constantly to adapt to new circumstances. My whole experience of living, she concludes, has been joyous, amazing, and fun. Children. I was the middle of the first three girls in the family. Floyd was the middle son. I think we get protected by being in the middle. We get to do what we want, but to pull it off, we learn to be cagey. It turns out Floyd has his own theory.
My name is Floyd, and I grew up in the middle of this large family and was very fortunate to be someplace in the middle, sort of hidden, where I could watch what was going on around me and learn a whole lot without saying much.
The three brothers in the bunch had their own relationship with each other, but he couldn't have hidden among them. He was just too good looking and just as goofy. Once we asked them to act as movie gangsters.
And then someone said to me and my brothers, put on those hats and pose for a television show. Well, I thought we were posing for Humphrey Bogart. My little brother Hugh thought they meant Al Capone, and Delano, well, he thought they meant the Three Stooges.
Floyd also graduated from Cokato High, had a pretty normal career, but remembers they didn't allow dancing in that high school. He liked to dance, and they had a lot of cliques he didn't like.
But right after that high school, I went right down to the University of Minnesota, where I spent the next couple of years really completing my high school education. And that was in part by taking some courses in the college that weren't offered in the high school, and in part by becoming a member of a fraternity where you learn what the real world is really about. As a matter of fact, I continued to stay in school because I knew that if I left, I was going to get caught in the draft. But then I figured out I couldn't avoid that forever. So, well, with a I did is, I guess I really became a counter spy in the military service is what I did. And traveled around the world and got my degree and got married and had some kids and then went on to become a lawyer at night law school. And after doing all that, returned back to the small community of my childhood. Not the same community, but I picked a small town in Ola Crescent, Minnesota, and laid out a plan of what I was going to do for the future. And, well, you know, like many plans, all of a sudden they get diverted. And my first wife decided to pursue her independent means, leaving me to be raised by 3 teenagers. And so I run into my greatest joy, which is a young widow called Sandy. Now, Sandra officially comes with 2 dogs at that time, which is Muffy and Mitzi. And we enjoy going down to the beach. And I present her with, well, I present these 4 that go, ta-da, to show what they can do. And of course, they always do that. I mean, even when Julie was married, they go, ta-da. And then when we get together for Christmas time, they go, ta-da, again. And then when Daphne gets married, well, what else are they going to do? Well, I suppose that Sandy and I could have stayed up north in the snow, and I could have enjoyed Sandy's cooking. But it so happened we took a trip down to the Mediterranean. And Sandy sort of liked the hats, and twins didn't mind the climate. And actually, Sandy started looking pretty good down there. So we moved to Florida, and that's where we've been ever since. And relatives still like to come to visit, including the screwy ones. And we like to stay down there and enjoy our home, but of course we travel up north to visit with our relatives too. It's good to get together at Christmas time, and it's good to celebrate a twins' victory or brag about a grandson. Of course, we still get together from time to time, and even right up until, just a few months ago when Ellen and I were sitting in my den and putting together the matters of Delano's recent death. Of course, under the watchful eye of Buffy.
So Floyd and Sandy live comfortably in Sarasota, Florida, the locus for their careers and lives, drawing strength and sustenance from each other. Being the lawyer for the family, no easy task, Floyd looks back on his career in law from a perspective remarkably like our father's. I asked him to reflect on why he had chosen law as his profession and small towns to live in.
Well, actually, if I was going to do that, I sort of concluded that the law is the last profession of a free man, and that if you were a lawyer or a banker in a small town, you can go out and then do anything you really want to do.
Oh, you sound like Daddy.
So I didn't really go into the law practice in order to practice law. Once I got into there, I figured that was as good a thing to do as any until I could try other things, and I did.
Looking back at Floyd's life and career from that perspective, what else can we say except ta-da! as in the grace of God, was one translation of the Finnish name Lempi. So in a way, her seventh child was named after her. Once upon a time, she was Baby Grace. Born in Spooner, Wisconsin in 1938, and then she was known as the one born with the club foot until she broke completely free of both stereotypes and asserted her own unique personality. She too graduated from Cokato High School, third in her class in 1955, then enrolled at St. Cloud State College, where she was co-chair of Snow Days, then left with her sister Ellen for a warmer climate to see something of the West and their brother Delano while attending UCLA. After that, she came to Detroit and lived for a while at my house, finishing her bachelor's and her master's at Wayne State University, both of them in the field of psychology. 15 years later, she added a PhD in developmental psychology from Notre Dame, but that came later. It was in Wayne's psychology courses that she met one William Dawson. The first major turning point in her whole life, she says, was their first date. Note the three Hillstroms in their wedding party, plus, very special, Grandma and Grandpa afterward at our house. The next turning point for her, she says, was when Bill was accepted into Harvard's PhD program in 1963. Grace turned down a fellowship offer from Wayne to follow him to Boston and then to Notre Dame, where on graduation he joined the faculty of the psychology department there. And there in South Bend, Indiana, on a street called Walsingham Lane, they have waltzed happily ever since. The next three major turning points, Grace says, were the days her three children were born: Marilyn, Sandra, and Billy. Growing, 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 still growing, and grown. Grace counts Marilyn's induction into the Navy as the next major event in her life. She's the only member of our immediate families now in military service, to quote Grace, protecting the freedoms we all enjoy and take for granted. The weddings of her other two children were also major events. This is Sandra's, this is Billy's. Grace, like I need, does love weddings. And now, imagine how special it is for her to spend time with Sandra's little Hannah, her first grandchild. Professionally, Grace has served without pay since 1984 as editor of a journal on gerontology and geriatrics. I asked what turned her on to this particular subject.
How did I become interested in gerontology? Well, that's the study of aging in the older adult. And that's a specialization in psychology. And as a developmental psychologist, it was natural that after studying child development, and my children were all raised, that I might as well study something about that be helpful for me. So I became interested in gerontology, and I had the opportunity to do some postdoctoral study at the Gerontology Center at Notre Dame. And that was kind of nice, since Bill had kind of settled down in the psychology department. And I found the study of gerontology to be very intriguing, because psychology offers a lot of information about how to live and what to look forward to. And so I'm really looking forward to my older adult years because of this study.
Reviewing all of your life experiences, what would you say has been Your greatest joy, your greatest dream, or your greatest happiness? She thought a while, and she replied, my living with Bill as his wife, his lover, his friend, and his partner. And those are the words of Amazing Grace.
It's too darn hot. It's too darn hot.
Our father had to wait until the alphabet reached H to hope for a son named after him, and he lucked in. Hugo Jr. was born in 1942 in Spooner, Wisconsin, nicknamed Butch. He eventually changed his name to Hugh. He was anchored in the family as the kid brother who shared our family history but stood a bit apart, younger than all but Irene, and to Floyd that was important.
And the best thing about Hugh, from my point of view, was that he was younger and smaller than I was. Because when Dad would pound upon Delano, he would pound upon me, and I had someone to pound on, and that would go to Hugh. And Hugh didn't have anybody. He would just sit there and cry, and we used to call him CBB, because that meant Crybaby Butch, because that was his nickname as a child.
Well, that's true. CBB was his nickname as a child, but Hugh became as capable of clowning as his brothers ever were, in this case with Mother's fresh baked bread. Was there anything ever as good as Mother's fresh hot bread? And you remember Al Capone, the movie gangster? When they lived in Cokato, Irene was too small for Hugh to pound on, and he wouldn't have wanted to take on Grace. But he too graduated from Cokato High, he too played sports, he too got called by the military, and he was stationed at Beale Air Force Base in California in 1962, when he met a young widow named Sheila Dashiell with a son named Donald and fell head over heels in love.
Promised when he came into the service that he would be in computer science, and he ended up being a clerical worker.
That's the Army.
And he wrote to Hubert Humphrey and said, look, this is what they promised me, and Hubert Humphrey intervened. And that's how Hugh ended up in Omaha in a computer science position.
Once Sheila finished her nursing degree, she joined him in Omaha. They were married by a justice of the peace in 1963. After graduation, he took a job with IBM in San Francisco, and they were ready to settle down into family life. But where were they going to live? Answer, in the heat.
And he wanted to live in the hottest part of the Bay Area. I wanted to live in the coolest part of the Bay Area.
Because he'd have enough of cold to last him the rest of his life. I know what that feels like.
'Cause it's too darn hot. It's too darn hot. It's too darn hot. It's too darn hot. It's too darn hot.
The next turning point in Hugh's life was the birth of his son John, nicknamed John John after the son of JFK. They were great Kennedy fans. Later, Hugh said he idealized his role as a father and saw Sheila as the ideal mother, with John John as the ideal son, because he wanted his son to have a better childhood than he himself had had. That's the first I knew he thought his own childhood less than ideal.
He'd pull off a magic trick by pulling a coin out of my ear, and then he explained to me how I derive a square root. I don't think I got it at the time.
They bought a cabin in the mountains to go skiing on weekends, where they would drink, play cards, and generally hang out. In 1974, the California Hillstroms crossed the country together in a station wagon, stopping at Mount Rushmore and Old Faithful and putting up with our nutty kids. And ending that trip with a boat trip to Sausalito, across the bay from San Francisco, that most cosmopolitan city that both of them by then had made their own. And I remember thinking, he's so cool, so at ease in his world. My little brother has done well. And in 1976, he was at the top of his form. He had added a master's degree in business from the University of San Francisco to his mathematics degree, to his credentials, but his marriage was facing tension. They both hoped things would improve if they went as a family to South Africa, where IBM wanted him to install a computer system. They went by way of Rio de Janeiro, where this photo was taken. John recalls.
When we went to South Africa, I was really sad because I missed all my friends. But hey, I had this great big house, and I had these great servants to look after me. So it wasn't actually that bad a deal for a 7-year-old, because I never had to pick up my room.
Donald was 17 at the time and remembers one harrowing adventure in the South African desert when it was over 100 degrees. What would you do if your rented car had a flat tire in the desert and you couldn't find where they put the spare?
We're freaking out, and I'm sitting back there going, Jesus, what's going on? I take a picture of this, and I look, and I go, I know where it is. I go, Dad, how about this? And I went up to him, I go, let's look underneath here. And we look underneath the back of the car, and there's the spare tire. Oh. So we were all pissed off and all relieved, and he didn't really know how to say thank you, or good job or pat in the back, but I knew that his pride was really hurt because he couldn't find the spare tire. 17-year-old son found it, So we drive up to the nearest place we found, the closest place we found, closest place we stopped, and we went in there and we had a couple cold beers, each of us, me and Dad and Sheila, and we just sat there, and that was our accomplishment. We had a mutual feeling of, thank God we're underneath the roof drinking a cold beer instead of being stuck out in that desert with a flat tire.
The next year, IBM flew Hugh to Florida for his father's funeral, where he spoke so movingly afterward I couldn't stop complimenting him. He told how he had just flown in from Johannesburg, where you could see ox carts in the street, and he recalled his father telling him seeing oxen pulling plows and ox carts on the streets of Minneapolis when he was young. He talked about the changes Dad had seen since those days, and how well he had used these changes to move to the forefront of research in his field. All this time he was speaking for the family and the family's view on our father's death. Now that might have been said of Hugh himself, who had been chosen for South Africa because he was one of only 12 people in the United States who knew computers well enough to do what he did for IBM. His son John, in turn, who has just completed his master's in computer science, comments on his father.
I think it's peculiar that I ended up in the same field as Dad worked in, because I never really did it on purpose. I thought I was going to go into international relations or something, but I guess it's in the genes. I'd really like to know what he would say about the state of the art today, because the computers we all have in our houses are a lot more powerful than anything he probably ever worked on.
That's probably true. After the funeral, Hugh flew back to South Africa, completed his work, and then returned to the United States, again by way of Florida, visiting with Mother and others there, and trying to adjust to a new life. For South Africa had not helped their marriage, it had made things worse. After the divorce, he seemed at first to be coping. But he was also struggling to make sense of this new turning point in his life. The very night he helped me celebrate my 50th birthday, he spent the dinner outlining his new world outlook and reviewing everything he'd done wrong in him, but I saw none.
He didn't come back from South Africa the way he left over there. And yet he told me that he got tired of defending South Africa to the people that he was working with in Oakland, that they criticized him for going there and for even working in that country. And he liked South Africa. He liked the lifestyle. It's just great to have somebody wait on your hand and foot and do everything for you. And
he was criticized for liking it.
Yeah. Like, didn't he see how terrible this country was? He didn't see. He didn't ever see Benny. Not any time.
Even when it was in front of his eyes.
Even when it was in front of his eyes.
2 years later, IBM flew him to a seminar in New York, and he just walked out and showed up at Ellen's, unwilling and unable to pull himself together. Then back to California, where he drove to my house somehow, leaving behind a devastating document of his self-contempt. He simply walked in. Quite simply, it was here or jail or an institution. Even the handwriting, jagged and unkempt, showed evidence of his disintegration, and he seemed unable to do anything to stop it. Neither could I. He sunk deeper into depression, so next we arranged to get him to Floyd's in Minnesota. Our hope, Floyd's and mine, was that working in his apple orchard might help. Then he went back to Florida for over a year until after a trip to Guyana where he was shot at, he fell so deep into depression he had to be hospitalized and eventually moved to a halfway house. It was there he took his own life. These photographs were taken the day before he committed suicide, when his depression was total and nothing anybody could say could make a difference. I asked him, though, if he could manage a smile for his son's sake. Knowing what the effort to smile must have cost him makes this final image of him a moving and beautiful gift to us all. Hugh died on August 26, 1983. He was 44 years old.
And now the end is near, and so I face the final curtain. My friend, I'll say it clear, I'll state my case, of which I'm certain. I've lived a life that's full. I traveled each and every highway, and more, much more than this, I did it my way.
The last in line, born 8 years after Hugh, was Irene Joyce. Inevitably, the rest of us in the family babied her. As a child, she was often singled out on Christmas cards. When she was born in New Prague, Minnesota in 1947, Ine was about to be married. Ine's son, Rick, is only 3 years younger than Irene is. At the time she was born, I was already at the university, Cal was a high school senior, and so on. Irene's childhood seemed to us a kind of miracle, a late arrival miracle. Late arrival gave her a unique role in the family. And she was unique too in her delicate features and fragile frame, her delicate health. She was the one member of the family left with our parents after the rest of us were long gone, especially in Cokato, including the time when Grandma and Grandpa came to live there, and she was her parents' mainstay. She too got her picture in the local papers there for her baking abilities. She too graduated from Cokato High School, although she didn't like high school and was glad when it was over. Her travels then took her to several of us in turn.
I went to work right after high school in Detroit, Michigan. In Detroit, I got married. And separated. From there, I went to Florida to stay with Sister Ellen. It was fun. From Florida, I went to Indiana to stay with Sister Grace. In Indiana, I worked a while and then decided to have open heart surgery due to a defect in the heart, whole from birth. Luckily, I made it through. From Indiana, I came back to Minnesota due to mental conditions. Minnesota has better care services here. Have been living here in Minnesota ever since. Because of mental illness, I ended up in hospitals several times. The last hospitalization, I had surgery on my colon, which burst. I had an ileostomy. Things went well, and I am still struggling along and doing well. I don't remember my past jobs, but the best I do remember is here in Minnesota. Task Unlimited, a mental health janitorial service. I worked there 14 years.
In fact, she did so well at TAS Unlimited, she was awarded a certificate she's rightly proud of. It reads, "To Irene Hillstrom for outstanding support to the Minneapolis Military Processing Station. She was praised for superior service exceeding expectations." The document ends, "Irene's pride and professionalism reflect great credit to herself."
The most joy in my life is I care about A through I, and thus I am able to cope on my own and not have to worry about family taking care of me as an invalid. How I do this and keep on ending up in the hospital, turn around and make it on my own, I don't know. But if God gives me the strength, I can make it on my own and on my own 2 feet without having crutches behind me.
What would you say is the most frightening part of your life?
Most frightening is my mental breakdowns.
I can imagine.
They were so scary to me that there are times I've been in locked wards. There are times I've been in the hospital for a month. There are times I felt I never was going to ever get to see my life again. But because of my own strength and the heels and that good Finnish sisu and the good Hillstrom push behind me, and knowing what Mother and Daddy had done for me in the past, pushing us along in his own way. The most important part of my life is now, mainly because I feel God has given me the strength to still be alive. I went through open heart surgery. I went through an ileostomy. I end up in jobs, state to state. I've been from family to family. I think everybody's taken care of me at one time or another.
And we loved it.
And other than that, I think that I can stand on my own 2 feet. Every time I go through a crisis, I'm blessed to have that halo hanging over me to cope me through and make it and do it on my own. which I'm doing right now. But I ended up nearer my job, nearer my care home, near my psychiatrist, near my my surgeon, and I'm doing it all on my own. And I'm doing it all on my own.
Yes, there were times, I'm sure you knew, when I bit off more than I could chew. But through it all, when there was doubt, I ate it up and spit it out. I faced it all, and I stood tall, and did it my way. Yes, it was my
Couldn't Irene's insistent refrain, "I did it my way, I did it on my own," be the model for the whole Hillstrom family, even Hugo and Delano? In fact, from the evidence on our children, couldn't it be the model for the whole Hillstrom line? It's been a source of family pride to be able to say, even when it defied the wishes of others, "I did it on my own, I did it my way."
Regrets, I've had a few, but then again, too few to mention. I did what I had to do, saw it through without exemption. I planned each charted course, each careful step along the byway. More, much more than this, I did it my way. Yes, it was my
Independence of mind is a value we have in common, or that combination of courage and stubbornness that we call sisu, a desire to achieve, and I think a certain oddball brand of humor, and the capacity for starting over again when things get tough. I don't think any of us aspired to get rich, but we all did aspire to accomplish something with our lives, to do something worthwhile. You'll also have noticed differences among us in choices of careers, our politics, our religion, our education, where we lived and how we lived. It would be wrong to ignore our disagreements, which have been profound. It would be wrong to ignore the dark side of our history, the suicides, depression, denials, estrangements lasting for years. But I also insist that ours is a very American story. It's a third-generation story, a diaspora up and out of middle America. It's never been boring. Sometimes it's been clumsy, sometimes it's been tragic, but also, I think, damned impressive and worth the attention of future generations. The time has come to pull this all together, to pull us all together with some concluding generalizations, using a few statistics for those who like statistics, and a random array of photographs. Call this a quiz, a game of trivial pursuits, not an IQ test, but an HQ test to quiz you on Hillstromiana, or is it Hillstromania? Sample trivia questions. Which of the 9 Hillstroms is missing from this photograph? Which of us is wearing a wig? How have attitudes toward alcohol changed? You got the idea. Okay, here we go. Let's start with 4 questions on vital statistics. Which of the 9 of us has the median number of children? Answer is Grace. She's the only one with 3, midway between 4 and 2. Our families were much smaller than previous generations. Next question. We know Cal has the most grandchildren. Who has the second most? Answer as of now is Hugh. His stepson Donald has 3 lively children in California. Third, how many high school and college degrees among the 9 of us? Answer, all 9 have high school degrees, 5 have college degrees, and all 5 of these went on to get advanced degrees. That's a big jump beyond previous generations. Fourth, how about our children's college degrees? Does that pattern continue? The answer, a definite yes for bachelor's degrees. The evidence on advanced degrees isn't in yet. Moving on then to another topic. Is there a pattern to our diaspora away from our ethnic roots? We've seen where the immigrants coming from Finland went to live and what their occupations were. What about us? In fact, there's a neat triangularity to our diaspora. 3 of the 9 went west, 2 to California, 1 to Oregon. 3 of us went south, 2 to Florida, 1 now in Alabama, and 3 stayed in the Middle West, 2 in Minnesota, 1 in Indiana, but no 2 of us live in the same town anywhere. In occupations, we're even more diversified. Next question. How many weddings and divorces have we celebrated? Trivially speaking, who were the bridesmaids, the flower girls? Who wore the heart-shaped headdress? How did we cope with divorce, which was a taboo to most of our forebears? Among 9 Hillstroms, 10 marriages, only 2 lasting beyond children, and 2 of the 10 were second marriages. 6 marriages ended in divorce, but only Irene took back the name Hillstrom. I count 3 flower girls, Grace, Angelita, and Maria. In 7 marriages, 1 or more Hillstroms stood up for each other. Now, your next trivia question. How many of the Hillstrom brides wore a certain heart-shaped headdress? And your next question. Which of the remaining snapshots does not belong in this collection? A postscript. In celebrating divorces, which of us claims to be triumphantly divorced? Which 2 of us remarried? And what Cole Porter's song inspired this divorce celebration? Hard question. Generations. Can you name all of the first names? And now, can you name who, where, and when with Frank Sinatra's aid?
That's life. That's life. That's what all the people say. You're riding high in April, shot down in May. But I know I'm gonna change that tune when I'm back on top in June. people get their kicks stomping on a dream. But I don't let it get me down. 'Cause this fine old world, it keeps spinning around. I've been a puppet, a pauper, a pirate, a poet, a pawn and a king. I've been up and down and over and out. And I know one thing, each time I find myself flat on my face, I pick myself up and get back in the race. That's life. That's life. I tell you, I can't deny it. I thought of quitting, baby, but my heart just ain't gonna buy it. And if I didn't think it was worth one single try, I'd jump right on a big bird and then I'd fly. I've been a puppet, a pauper, a pirate, a poet, a pawn and a king. I've been up and down and over and out. And I know one thing, each time I find myself laying flat on my face, I just pick myself up and get back in the race. That's life. That's life. And I can't deny it. Many times I thought of cutting out, but my heart won't buy it. But if there's nothing shaking come this here July, I'm gonna roll myself up in a big ball and die.
Sisu and Sibelius. So the first question on your HQ test, which Sibelius symphony do you hear in the background ending and ending and ending? Next question, what does Sisu mean? An excellent question, but too important to be called trivia. We say it means courage, guts, true grit, but it's really more. It's an inner toughness that helps you stand up to whatever life hands you, plus an inner restraint that won't let you smear your pain around or become a victim or even admit you need help. We wear the word as a slogan on Sisu shirts, sometimes to buck ourselves up when we need to have Sisu, when we're coping with something really hard, sometimes just to affirm our identity, our ethnic roots, since Sisu also describes the Finnish national character. Though you don't have to be Finnish to have it. Our parents certainly had it. More than that, our parents hoped to pass it on to their children and their children's children and so on, even with the evening meals. Okay. As for the sauna, it was invented by the Sami people at least 4 centuries ago, as were the sweat lodges of American Indians, which were based on the same principle. Levitar loved to say that his sauna steam spa would make both revered traditions available to ordinary people in ordinary bathrooms. He dreamed of marketing his sauna through Kmart. In any case, the sauna does seem to be an institution likely to survive over the course of coming generations, perhaps even as long as Sisu and Sibelius. We arrive at my final array of random photos. These are mostly on recent family history. I call this section Riding High because Ella Fitzgerald is going to ride us through it right to the end. Your challenge again, answer who and when, and just to be tricky, if not California or Florida, where?
Life's great, life's grand, future all planned. No more clouds in the sky. How am I riding? I'm riding high. Someone I love, mad for my love. So long, Jonah, goodbye. How am I riding? I'm riding high. So ring bells, sing songs, blow horns, beat guns.